All right. Well, it is kind of a scary day today if you turn on the news because it looks like we are headed closer and closer into war with Iran. The reports are that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard has seized 2 more ships on top of the small vessel that I told you about yesterday. They seized the Raya, which is a ship that had been suspected of smuggling by both the Iranians and some Israelis, in fact. But this time, the Iranians have seized a British oil tanker, the Stena Impero, and a Liberian tanker that is owned by a British company. So there are Brits on both of these ships. Now, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard says that the ships failed to follow international maritime regulations. So they're saying that suddenly the Stena Impero veered off course and headed straight for Iran. And then they came out there and they escorted the ship, they seized the ship. They had some boats and a helicopter and they escorted the ship to the Iranian coast, where they would then turn it over to maritime police, maritime enforcement people. Now, the other ship, the Liberian ship that has a Liberian flag, is actually owned by a British company. And shortly after the Stena Impero was seized, the Liberian tanker was seized. And they saw on the radar that tanker also kind of took a sharp veer off and towards Iran. So now the Iranians are saying, hey, both of these ships just sort of headed towards us, and that's why we captured them. But the Brits are saying, no, these ships were in international waters. Now, this does come after the UK only hours earlier refused to release the Grace 1, which was the Iranian oil tanker that is largely suspected to have been on its way to Syria, although the Iranians say it's none of anybody's business. And the UK announced that they will continue to hold the Grace 1. So then hours later, these British ships were seized. So, I mean, I think that I think it's quid pro quo. I'm speculating now. I don't know, but I would guess that maybe the Iranians did seize the original British oil tanker that was going through, and then maybe the Liberian tanker. Who knows what was going on with that one? Maybe it was trying to go and intervene with the Iranians trying to seize the original British tanker. Who knows? And so they ended up taking both, but. Because of this, the analysts are saying that this is going to head us into war, that the Iranians are escalating tensions. Now, the USS Boxer said that it had shot down an Iranian drone. The Iranians have come out now saying, no, you didn't. All of our drones made it back safe. You didn't shoot down any of our drones. And Trump is insisting that, yes, the USS Boxer did, in fact, shoot down the Iranian drone. So the tensions are definitely escalating. The Iranians, I think they have a bit of a case. If you're going to seize the Grace 1, what do you kind of expect in retaliation, especially when you refuse then to release the Grace 1? The Iranians, their case is, look, we don't have economic embargoes or sanctions on Syria. We can do what we want with our oil. And the Brits are saying, no, you can't. You're not allowed to give oil to Syria, which doesn't make any sense to me. I think, I don't understand why they can't just do what they want with their oil. It is their oil. Now, the Iranians are saying, this is according to The Guardian here, it says Iranian politicians have been calling for reprisals, and the country's forces led by the Revolutionary Guards are being increasingly aggressive in disrupting shipping lanes in the Gulf. Iranian officials have said that if Iran is not to be allowed to export its oil, it should not be expected to safeguard the free flow of oil from other Gulf states. And that also sounds kind of reasonable. I mean, I hate to sit here and continue to have to defend the Iranians because I'm not a big fan of their current government. But I also believe that if the Iranian people are not happy with their government, they will be the ones to overturn their government. They don't need a foreign power marching in with ulterior motives to go in there and overturn the government that they're living under. That is up to them to decide on. We might not like the way they live. I personally don't like hyper-religious states. I would like to live in a secular state. But it's none of my business, right? It's the Iranians' business. They're the ones who get to decide. So, fair enough. The Strait of Hormuz is right next to the Iranian coast. They're watching all of these tankers go through, exporting oil all around the world, and yet they're not allowed to. So I could understand their angst. They're also dealing with heavy sanctions. Their people are suffering. It is not very good. And then on top of it, for the Brits to not release their oil tanker, adding insult to injury, and then the Iranians seem to do a tit for tat. So now this also comes after the Iranians offered to allow more intrusive inspections of their activity to prove that they are not in the business of making weapons of mass destruction. But the U.S. has said no. The U.S. wants a whole host of concessions from Iran, including them. They don't want them to enrich any uranium at all, which actually the EU has said, well, they can enrich some uranium because uranium enrichment is used for nuclear power plants, and so you would need that if you're going to have, if you're going to be reliant on nuclear power. So, look, the analysts that when you turn it on the news and what everybody's saying and what the administration is saying is that they are claiming Iran is trying to escalate tensions into a war. But I think the big question everybody needs to ask is what would be Iran's motivation? Why would they want to go to war with the United States? It doesn't even make sense. So if it made sense, then we could all sit there and say, yeah, okay, we understand, and yeah, they definitely want war, but it doesn't even make sense. They really just largely have always wanted to be left alone, and they want to manage their nation the way they want to manage it, and they want also to be able to trade freely with the rest of the world and be considered a sovereign nation. They're being denied that. When you sanction a nation, you're essentially saying we don't agree that you're your own sovereign entity, that you now are below us, and we don't like you, and therefore we're not going to trade with you. We're not going to allow anyone else to trade with you. Again, it's that chilling effect that I spoke about in the last video, that even if the Iranians don't have certain sanctions on them, companies are unwilling to do business with them because they're afraid that the company's afraid they're going to be retaliated against by the West. So this is, you got to ask, this is all coming down to weapons of mass destruction. It all comes back down to that. The whole fear, why we went into the nuclear deal, why Trump is backing out of it, why he backed out of the nuclear deal, all of the escalation of all these tensions revolve around weapons of mass destruction. And we need to remember this, everybody. Weapons of mass destruction. Do not fall for this again. Do not fall for this again. Weapons of mass destruction. The inspectors have said there is no evidence of this. The Iranians have been following through with the agreement. There is no evidence that they are building a nuke. The Iranians are offering to have even more aggressive inspections to prove that they are not in the business of building a nuke. And yet all of this is about weapons of mass destruction. The United States has way more to gain going into war with Iran than Iran has trying to pick a fight with the West. The U.S. going to war with Iran would be Israel as well, and clearly the British. Why would Iran want to go to war with those three nations? Iran has no desire nor need to do this. If Iran wants the economic sanctions lifted off of them, war is certainly not the way to do it. And anybody with any sense in their mind would know this. That would only create more economic sanctions on you. So it wouldn't make any sense whatsoever for Iran to pick a fight and try to escalate into war. However, Israel wants to topple Iran. The United States wants to topple Iran. The EU wants to topple Iran. All of these nations have been very much invested in hating on this regime since the Iranian Revolutionary War in 1979, when the Shah was ousted. The Iranian Revolution happened, and the Iranians pretty much shut down the westernization of their nation, including the foreign capitalization of their natural resources. Iran wants to control their own natural resources. They want to control their currency. They want to control all of these things. They want to be a sovereign nation, and we're seeing this pushback from Iran. They have been hostile to the United States only in the sense of they don't want to be imperialized by the West. We are still very much an imperial nation, and many nations in the East are pushing back. Nations in this are Latin American nations, neighbors. We're seeing a lot of nations around the world pushing back on American imperialism and Western imperialism. And the Brits are so happy. They used to be the big imperialists, and then they got the United States to do the dirty work. So they don't really have to do it anymore. We'll go and do it for them because we're the naive young ones. So Look, the big question everybody needs to ask once again is, what does Iran have to gain going into war with the United States? If you could come up with a really good answer, I'm willing to listen to it. But I can't think of a real reason why Iran would want to do this. It doesn't make any sense at all. They want the sanctions lifted on them. War is not the way to do it. But war certainly is a way for the United States to topple a regime, a government, and put in their own regime that they want in controlling the nation, so that they can then milk their resources and make a lot of money off of them. And all will be well in the world when we can go and do that, right? So that is the latest that is going on. It is very scary today, turning on the news and watching everybody escalate these tensions, talking like, oh, look at what Iran's doing. They're so aggressive. They're so aggressive. They're coming after us. I don't see the motivation. I do understand why they would capture this British oil tanker, because the Brits aren't releasing their oil tanker. It's tit for tat. I think that's kind of fair enough, guys. So give them back their tanker. They'll give you back your tanker, and let's just move on. There's the solution. Problem solved. No need for war. It's that simple, okay? Return the tankers. Let's not go to war over this. Thank you so much for watching. This video will be demonetized. Anytime I talk about Iran, it's demonetized. I appreciate your support very much. The links are down below for my PayPal and Patreon. And let's just see how this unfolds, and hopefully it doesn't unfold in a way that costs people many, many, many lives. And not again, guys, not again.